Be friendly!
Greatest contact. A single bogey and it's nearly on top of us.
Identify.
No transponders, no recognition codes. It has to be a silent radar.
Alright, progress so far. I've opened up this seam here and I'm ready to lay in my glue, and then I'll show you what I do here on camera, but I lay in my glue, these one seam, two seam. I'm not going to worry about that, I'll do that a different way. And then across the top here I can lay in, this is a nice little groove, so we'll lay in that, and then across the back with regular standard cement. And then what I typically do is I immediately go back over it. I'm going to use the Plaster Weld, and it dilutes this other glue here, this liquid cement for plastic models. It dilutes that a little bit, but what it does is it sets it in place long enough for it to continue to glue. And for those that you haven't seen it, here is the inside the cockpit. And that gives you an idea of all of the, oh, lights just went out. The lights that are in there, again using SMDs. And then here is just a quick head-on of the two headlights. And I think for the most part this is going to at least get us there. So, careful with that. And I'm going to get my brush ready to go. Plaster Weld, and then my weld here. So this is always a delicate time for me, but we will see what occurs. I do give Moebius a lot of credit. This is nice seam work. And then a quick turn. And you know, rather than just two butt seams, it's a seam that's got an overlapping groove to it. Nice to glue to, as well as giving you the capability to look how nice that goes together. I am just super thrilled with that. Same thing on the bottom. And then, like I said, typically what I do is using my brush. This keeps me from having to clamp this thing for hours and hours and hours. Just basically use my brush, and then I come back along and just run this as a quick filler down the seam itself. Tends to work that glue a little bit, and again, the capillary action, you're seeing it react with that color. And pushing that together, and then same thing here, just running that seam down through there, across the top. Capillary action here. And there. across the back here. Now, what I want to be careful of is that if you put your clamps too tight, rather than that coming together like so, frequently what I found is that your clamps start to push that plastic up. And what I'd rather have it do is just, because these seams are so nice, I'd just rather have it sit there really nice and then have it close up. Maybe a little more pressure there, and one on this one. Like so, and you can actually see that seam starting to jump a little bit. Let's pop it over and take a quick look here, what we're dealing with on the top side. Yeah. So this is a good time to just run another little quick bead of Flexi Weld. Again, kind of using that process I used last time. Now the nice thing is that that glue is all kind of popping out, and I'm great with that because what I'll do is just sand that off. And I'll let that sit now for a bit because we want that seam to connect. I just want to check the height between the two. It looks like it's fantastic. We'll let that glue up, and then we'll break out the sanding sticks and take care of that stuff. And we are off and running. So the sloppy modeler strikes again. Alright, welcome back. It's been a couple of days since I've had a time to work on the model. So here's kind of where we sit after a couple of days. So I taped off the cockpit, taped off my wires so I'm not pulling on them, and taped off the landing gear here, and got a first coat of primer on this. A couple of things I'm really thrilled about. This seam here is almost completely gone. A couple of whiffs with the sandpaper should take care of that. I left this seam is completely gone. Very thrilled with the way that turned out. And then I've used my panel line scraper here. This is kind of can go awry very quickly, and just starting to put this line up, and that's how it goes awry, just like that. So it gets worse, I guess, as we go along. So what I'll have to do is fill that a little bit and be much more careful with that. So working through this panel line and making it deep enough that it's going to show up, and that's also kind of references what the other stuff is. What I'm trying to avoid is having a bunch of paint and glue build up in that panel line, and create one that is matches these other panel lines here, right? So that's kind of the goal, and that looks pretty good except for my little whiff there. But what we'll do is run my sanding stick. Now I picked this up at Big Lots here in Michigan for $1.50, and essentially it's got 7 steps to make your nails super polished, which I haven't done, but a coarse grit, medium, fine grit, and then even it out, smooth the nail, buff the nail, and shine the nail. This is basically just like a leather piece almost. However, these are absolutely fantastic. If they get wet, you just or if they get filled up, you just wash them with water, and that'll wash all that grit out of it, and you're right back to it till you wear it out. And what I have found, what I really like, is the firmness of it. That I don't need to use that large of a grit. Basically, a quick run across the paint, and I'm not going to go too deep with that. I just want to get that a little scuff so I can add some more primer here in a minute. And then we're going to go ahead and go with the even out, and give that just a little bit of polish right there. And already we're looking much better. We still retained our line there, and we're getting to the point where this will fill in. So side 5, again, bring that up to reduce those scratch marks on the primer. And then side 6, which is buff the nail. And finally 7, where you just can bring that polish back up. And that is a nice finish there to spray primer on again. So, and then, you know, you don't have to start with the heavy grit like I did. You could start with like part 4, you know, even it out, and just for priming, sanding your primer. For instance, I got a few spots here, just a quick sand across there. You're not actually getting through the primer for a change, but you're just taking that high spot off and prepping for the next little final coat of primer. Same thing here on the seam, across the top. And I'm actually really thrilled with the way that turned out and the way this turned out. So I'll give that another quick coat of primer and do a little more sanding here with even out phase. And just it knocks high spots off or knocks dirt out, or you might have some dirt in your spray booth or something like that that got onto it. So we're taped up, and just a nice little shot across the whole thing here to give the next coat of primer a little bit to sit on, or to adhere to. And once that's ready to go, we'll go back into the booth and spray another coat, and that should take care of that. So that is the fuselage pretty well taken care of. This is ready to go. I'm ready to apply the decals to that, and we'll do that next, and then come back to you on that piece of it. The engine housing, the lights are taped up, and the galvanized tin was taped up, and I got a coat of that light gray onto the tire unit at the bottom here. Like I said, I'm going to paint the landing gear black, and so that is got its coat of paint on there ready to go. And now we're just really getting down to painting the hull. I think one more quick coat of primer and then back to it. So we'll go ahead and take care of that, and then we'll come back to you. Thank you. Well, I got something in the mail today. Actually, I got 2 somethings in the mail today. The first one is the landing gear for my Revell 1/677 scale Voyager. I'm going to build that landed with landing gear. I guess that may be a theme. Regardless. So that came in the mail, a set of resin kits, and I am excited to have those. The other thing that came in the mail today was this Flytron.com, Flytron.com, and this is a Strobon SE, and actually that label's wrong. This is an SE version 2, and this is a little tiny circuit. But essentially what you've got is this is an RC flying airplane scale model circuit board. And this is for strobes, and I'm going to put one of these in my most recent builds. I ordered 10, and they took about 3.5 weeks to get in here to Michigan. So that's something to consider if you're going to order some of these. And they're about, with tax, about $4.50 a piece by the time you get all said and done. But I'm amazed that somebody can produce these for $4.50 a piece, ship them and get them here from England to the States. So very much appreciative of Flytron.com and getting these out and getting them here. And as essentially what you're working with here is a strobe light circuit. You've got the 2 positive negative LED, and if you run leads off of this, I think you could probably run maybe 3 LEDs on it at a time. That's probably the max, because you've got about 6 volts. 4 to 6 volts is the 3 to 6 volts is the current on the LED. And then you've got your inputs. Now there are 3 inputs here, S, plus, and minus. I don't know what the S stands for. Again, you can see the version 2 there. And I'm pretty sure that's for control if you're running a transmitter to it, that you can turn the strobes on and off from an RC transmitter. Well, I'm not going to use that. Essentially what I'm going to use is a momentary switch, and I'll connect it to, you can see here, right here, there are 2 little connectors. And if you actually, and I'm going to turn this on now and show you the strobe effect, and it is exactly what I was looking for. And with that, if you actually touch those 2 leads with a, and this is kind of all freestyle here at the moment, with a pair of tweezers, or actually close the circuit. it will change up, unless I did something wrong here. There we go. It will actually change up the circuit and change up the strobe effect. Now there's supposed to be 5 different modes here. Oh, there's a different mode. So that is a ramp up with a burst, and then a ramp down. And let's see if we can get another mode. Just a single flashing light. That's about a second on and a second off. That is 3 modes. And that's just a ramp up without the flash, and then the double flash. And that's probably the mode that I will use it in. So I couldn't be more thrilled to receive this in the mail today. I'm going to finish up my TOS Original Series Viper. That's probably the next section that we're going to work on. It's all done. It's just simply a matter of putting together the putting the strobe circuit in with the momentary switch and then wiring it to the strobe that I put on the back of the TOS Cylon Raider. If I said Viper, I was incorrect. And then, of course, I think I've mentioned that this is going to get one with these. So stick around, and we'll see what happens with adding a strobe to the original series Viper. We'll be back soon. Okay, let's talk about our progress here on the original series Viper, 1/32 scale from Moebius. This has been, the intakes there have been painted with the silver. You've seen that. Put a gloss coat over the intakes, over the light gray that I've been using, and now we are going to put the decals on, because I think it's going to be significantly easier to put the decals on as they sit here and have access to all the corners, rather than if you would have this mounted onto the actual fuselage. So as you can see, this has got a curve to it, and essentially curves go forward onto the smaller side. That's the easiest way that I remember it. I typically, what I'll do is let that sit for a minute, take my brush, and essentially just wet the whole area. That seems to help it slide quite a bit more. Sometimes, depending on the situation, obviously the microsol, microset first, and then microsol later. These Moebius decals are really pretty nice. It looks like they slide really well and place really well. So we're going to just see how good my work is here as we bring that around. So I think the key is here with this is to have it line up with the one in front, and that does make it just a bit of a challenge to get there. And if it doesn't slide, what I do then is just basically saturate it with water, and then that gives me the ability, I think, to move it around a little bit, hopefully. Yeah, there we go. So now we can start to place this in line with the one that I've already put on, and get all of our edges lined up. A little bit of overlap there, so let's pull that back a little bit. And this one's already been placed. I want to be careful not to, it's wet, so I want to be careful not to have it kind of move all over the place on me. So I'm going to just try to move that forward, have that line up with the other one. And then once you've got it lined up on top, of course, then the challenge is to get it to line up with the same distance all the way around. And I'm just OCD enough that typically I can have those line up by eye, although my results always vary later on, because I look at it and go, what was I thinking right there? But for me, I think that that looks pretty good. A lot of guys will use Q-tips or you know, other kinds of really fancy stuff. I like just a regular polyurethane brush, and what I do is I'll dry it out on my pad here rather than working on this and scratching up my parts. I got this is just a simple drying pad I got at a local grocery store for drying your dishes on. but it comes in 3 layers, and you can open it up to have a pretty good size model on it, or make it smaller like I've done here, and it really protects your model from having a problem. So there's decal number 2 on, and from the looks of it, I think that looks pretty good. And if you get these small bumps in it, again, you're going around corners, and these are actually chamfered corners, so those are cambered corners. Those are really, really challenging. So I'm not going to worry too much about any of these little tiny bumps, because I think the micro saw, if I use that on this here, will bring that back out and give me a little bit of leeway. So I'm going to do the other one of these and then work from there. We'll come back to you soon. Well, welcome back to the TOS 1/32 scale Viper. Just a quick review of what we've done. The decals are now on, and I've just allowed them to dry, and you can see we've got a couple of wrinkles here and on the corners specifically. So the next step I'm going to take is to use our good old-fashioned Mr. Microsol here. And Microsol setting solution for decals. We'll just put the first coat on that for the first time, and we'll let that sink in and hopefully take care of a lot of that wrinkles and so forth. But I'm still really pleased with the way this is turning out. Next step is actually do the wing decals along with the internal engine decals here before we start assembling this. And I've got the clear coat drying on the fuselage now, so when that comes back, we'll be ready to put that on. So we're going to put the decals on. I need to probably wait a few hours to let this dry up a little more from the clear coat that's on here right now. Once clear coat's on and dried, then we will put on the wing decals and get the Microsol down with those. And then once that's in place, especially like under some of these areas here that are really difficult to get to, we should be able to get to that. Just a real quick note, this is what the tiny little strobe looks like on top from a brightness perspective. I think with having that new strobe circuit in place, I'm going to be thrilled with the way that's going to flash and run it. And additionally, I added another circuit here to run in through my landing gear. So I'll have 3 circuits that'll run into that. And I think what I'm going to do is 1 circuit for the strobe, 1 circuit for the cockpit, and cockpit and the landing lights when those come on, and then a final circuit for the engine lights. So again, 1 for the strobe, 1 for the cockpit and combination landing lights, and then finally 1 for the engine. So those 3 switches will be at the base to light this up as we go, and then there'll probably be a 4th switch in the base for the strobe effects and momentary switch, and then finally there'll be 1 more switch for the runway lights, which I'm going to build in the base, and you'll see that later on as we go. So right now we're going to put the Microsol onto this set of decals, and then we'll be back after that's done. Well, let's catch ourselves up to speed. So currently the model has been clear coated, and the front half has been glued into the rear half. This is still loose, and the wings are still just in friction fit, but they're in actually pretty tight. And what I did is I followed Lou Del Masso's program of routing that out so I could slide those on and off rather than sandwiching it as the instructions say. I really feel that's a much better process. So what I'm trying to do is figure out where these line up, and I think that next batch on the instructions, which would be like right here, 15A, and I'm going to go with A, which is the narrow ones all the way around. I think that those essentially line up with this line right here that goes around the program. So this line right here is the one that we're going to try to line up with right there, and it should line up with the front of the fuselage. So we're going to go ahead and put on decal number 5A it is, and once we've got that on, then we'll be able to see where we're at from a progression standpoint, and then add these as we go up through. So we're making progress, and the base is coming along. We'll reveal that a little bit later, And so for right now, we're going to work on these decals, get hopefully both sides of these done, and then once that's in place, then we can start gluing this down, and then wiring all the cockpit, landing gear lights, and everything else as we go. Get all that locked in. So we'll go from